over 90% of reports to CPS. CPS themselves ultimately deems as unfounded.
Right.
That means even CPS thinks, oh yeah, there's no actual abuse or neglect going on here. That just gives you an indication that there's major over-reporting because we've effectively put a legal gun to people's heads and said you must report.
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rock podcast. I am excited to be back with you guys this week. I have had so much fun listening to our other hosts, and it's still weird for me when I turn on the Schoolhouse Rock podcast and I hear someone else's voice. I'm like, wait, what am I listening to right now? But man, I have been so encouraged by them, and I know that you have been too, because we are hearing from you guys and you are loving it. We got an email the other day from a listener, and she was like, at first I wasn't sure. It was a little bit different because it wasn't your voice. But she said the content has stayed the same, and she's so encouraged by it. And so we're excited to hear that from you. We've heard it from several of you, and we know that you are continuing to be blessed by the Schoolhouse Rocks podcast. And we are so grateful for our team of hosts that are part of this. But I am excited to be back with you this week. And I have a wonderful guest on. I'm so excited to be on with Bradley Pierce this week. He is from Heritage Defense, and you guys are going to be so encouraged. He's got lots to talk about. We're going to talk about some like homeschool legal stuff this week and next week, and stuff that I don't think that we've ever talked about on the podcast. And so this is going to be a really fun conversation. But before we get started, I first want to say thank you to our sponsor, BJU Press Homeschool. We love BJU Press Homeschool. You guys know it. We've used them for many years. They are part of our homeschool curriculum, and they are dedicated to providing homeschool families with academically strong curriculum that is rooted in a strong biblical worldview. And they offer complete curriculum from preschool through 12th grade. They've got traditional textbooks and video courses. So whatever works best for you and your family, they've got something for you. Check them out at bjupresshomeschool.com, and they will really help you on your homeschool journey. bjupresshomeschool.com. Well, Bradley, I am so excited to have you back with me. I know that you are oftentimes a speaker at different homeschool conventions and conferences and homeschool things. And speaking of that, really quickly, I forgot to mention this. Our family, Garrett and Lacey and I, are going to be at the Teach Them Diligently conference in Branson, Missouri, May 15th through 17th. So it's just a few weeks from now. I know you guys, maybe you're still on the fence as to whether or not you're going to attend, but we would love to meet you there. So if you are going to be anywhere near Branson in May, come and see us at Teach Them Diligently. You can go to teachthemdiligently.net, and you can get 25% off of the family pass, which is, it's $100. You could get 25% off of that with the code SR for Schoolhouse Rocked. And you can use that code actually for any of their conferences, but we will be in Branson. You can find us at Ginger Hubbard's booth. We are super excited to be there. We're just going to be there hanging out, you guys. I'm not speaking. Garrett's not speaking. We are just going there to hang out with you and with Ginger. So if you're going to be there, let us know and come and meet us. Anyway, back to Bradley. I am excited to have you with us. Bradley, for those who are not familiar with you or with Heritage Defense, talk a little bit about who you are and what Heritage Defense does.
Yeah. Well, thanks, first of all, very much for having me on. It's great to be with you. A little bit about me personally. So first of all, I am a homeschool graduate myself. I graduated in the year 2000. So I'm like a senior millennial homeschooler. And my wife is also a homeschool graduate, and we homeschool. Now we're expecting number 12. So,
Wow.
so I say we're homeschooling all 12, because I like to say that homeschooling begins at conception.
Yeah.
And so we're homeschooling all of our children, second generation, and we're very grateful for that. And I'm a Christian. That's the most important thing about me, is by the grace of God. So yeah, that's about me personally. So at Heritage Defense, I'm the vice president and general counsel here at Heritage Defense. We've been around since 2010 when we first launched this. I've been practicing law since 2007. And along with Don Hart, the president here, we launched Heritage Defense in 2010. And we just tried to defend parental rights of Christian homeschooling families. There's other organizations out there like HSLDA that do a great job of defending your right to homeschool. But a lot of times parental rights come under attack in other ways, right? Social workers not knocking at your door, not because you're a homeschooler per se, but because of some other kind of false allegation or overblown allegation. Someone, has some kind of suspicion, false or overblown, that you get reported to Child Protective Services, social worker at your door, we're there for you, right? You join Heritage
Yeah.
Defense before something arises, and then you have somebody to call 24/7 that can help you. So that's what we do here.
Yeah. Love it. I wish that it wasn't needed today. We'd like to think that we're free in every way.
Yeah.
But as we have seen over the last many, many years, there are people and organizations and parts of our government that are trying to take control over the things that we can and cannot do with our children. And so you talked about how there are social workers who might just show up at your door. And I like to think, we live in Oklahoma. We live in a very free state. It's free to homeschool here. We don't report to anybody. And so people take advantage of things like that. And there are states that are not nearly as free as ours. But whether you live in Oklahoma or New York, it doesn't really matter. We still need to protect those freedoms, but we also need to be prepared and ready. So talk about, let's start there where, a social worker shows up at your door. And I would love to think that this is never going to happen, but it could. It's not likely, but it could happen. What are some things that we can do to prepare ourselves and our families as homeschoolers? And really quickly, I want to back up because you said you're a homeschool grad. I don't know what it was like when you were growing up, but when you were a kid, I'm assuming it was a little bit more secretive homeschooling. You didn't probably go out to the grocery store in the middle of the day like I do with my kids now. People would question you, question your mom, why are you not in school? So maybe back up a little bit, talk about what it used to be, talk about what it is today, and then why we need to protect those freedoms and how we can prepare ourselves.
Well, it was illegal for the first few years. So that made it to where, you weren't really advertising it very broadly. Keep the window shades closed and things like that until school lets out. Actually, the first time I ever went to court was when I was, I think I was 9 or 10 years old.
Oh, wow.
My mom woke my brother and I up, and our neighbor who also homeschooled and her son, and we drove to the Texas Supreme Court in the middle of the night to get there. It was like 4 or 5 hours away. Drove there to go to the Texas Leaper case that was being argued there, which was a case to determine whether or not homeschooling would be legal or not. And thankfully, that was great to go and listen to that case as a child.
Yeah.
And now, the court ultimately did decide that yes, homeschooling is legal in Texas. But it was a very different world, back then. And even after it was legal, people still, looked at you sideways, and it's very odd, that children being out and about with their parents, during school hours was still kind of a curiosity at the very least to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So it's a very different world we live in now. On the subject of parental rights, kind of beyond homeschooling, what's interesting is that you think, well, I live in Texas, or you live in Oklahoma, or other folks live in these red states, conservative states, and like, well, I don't have to worry about that here. Just like we have, we sometimes go to Florida for different homeschool conferences, and people there are like, well, I don't need parental rights defense. I have DeSantis as my governor, and or people are like, oh, well, Trump is now the president, so we don't have to worry about that. And what's interesting is that the states that are actually the most aggressive on CPS issues are oftentimes the most conservative states, and the states that are the the least aggressive are sometimes the most liberal states. And so it's obviously, the more conservative states are going to be more law and order. We hate child abuse, and that's great. But that ends up a lot of times meaning that way too much discretion and authority is given to CPS, and they end up, getting involved in people's lives that they really shouldn't.
Yeah.
And it's why across the country, studies show that 37% of children will be part of a CPS investigation by the time they turn 18.
Wow.
That's the data in America as a whole. So more than 1 out of 3 children, will be part of a CPS investigation. A lot of people, you think that number may be high, but the issue is the reason you don't hear about a lot of those. And I think most people do hear about some of those things. But people aren't advertising that. They're not like, hey, guess what I got accused of? And going on social media like, hey, I'm being investigated for child abuse. So people aren't really open and advertising it, but it's happening across the country.
Yeah.
And the other odd thing about that is, when someone gets arrested for something, you think, Yeah, they probably did it. Yes, there's a presumption of innocence till they're proven guilty as far as legally, but we all think like, yeah, they probably did it. With CPS allegations, it's actually the opposite. By their own data, over 90% of reports are unfounded.
Mhm.
Over 83% of investigations are unfounded. So you have a lot of innocent families that end up with social workers knocking at their door that haven't done anything wrong. So
Yeah.
that's why it's a big issue.
Yeah, we have a friend who she delivered her baby at home. She's a homeschool mom. She delivered her third child at home and had a family member call CPS on her because she didn't like that she had delivered her baby at home, without having, a doctor there, and that she was
Right.
homeschooling her kids and taking control of her family.
How dare
And
you?
so, right. And so one day, she just had a CPS worker show, and it was completely unfounded. Of course, the CPS worker came in and was like, you're fine. There's absolutely nothing to be concerned of here. But it was so shocking to that family and really traumatic for them because it just makes you somewhat fearful, So
Right.
if, say, perhaps you have a CPS worker, you might have a family member, unfortunately, who would do something like that. Or maybe you have a nosy neighbor who just doesn't like that you homeschool, or they don't like the way that you're living your life. They don't like that your kids are playing out in the backyard at noon instead of sitting at the table doing their schoolwork. If you have something like that happen, how do we prepare ourselves as parents for that knock on the door?
Yeah, well, obviously, we would say, join Heritage Defense, so you can have an attorney. But
Yeah.
if you're not a member of Heritage Defense, just get an attorney that you know that you can call quickly, because there's different responses if a CPS social worker comes to your door, right? You could just say ignore it, like you look on your doorbell camera and like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to answer the door. You could do that. That's an option. Or you could open the door, find out who they are, and then say, no, get off my lawn kind of thing. The problem with both of those is that, they could go around now and start talking to your neighbors and asking them questions about you. And now all your neighbors know that you're being, investigated for child abuse. And that's not anything that anybody really would want.
Right.
They could also go get a court order to come into your home. And so you may have temporary reprieve there, but they may come back in a few hours with law enforcement with a court order. And now you have to let them in, and you have to let them interview your children alone. And
Right.
maybe even many other things that the court order says that now you have to do, or you're getting arrested, and they're going to do it anyway. And so, typically it's not the best practice to just say no or to ignore them. It's best to go ahead and open the door and find out who they are and what they want.
Mhm.
But that's when, once they kind of say, well, here's what the allegations are, or maybe they're not willing to tell you what the allegations are, even though they're legally required to. Many times they don't want to tell you. That's when you need an attorney, because you could start talking, could start trying to defend yourself. But just like in a criminal situation, anything you say can and will be used against you.
Mm.
And even if you just say, no, you can't come in my home, well, now you're the one who's being the bad guy. You're being uncooperative, as
Looks like
opposed to
you're
having
hiding
an attorney.
something. Yeah.
Exactly. And so having an attorney, just gives you that advocate who can run interference for you. You can be cooperative, but the attorney can be the one to say, no, we're not going to do that, or let's reschedule, or that sort of thing. And then the attorney can be there with you every step of the way, advocating for you.
Yeah. So have you gotten some of those phone calls yourself? What does that look like? You have a parent who might call you up and say, hey, I've got CPS standing at my door.
Oh, yeah.
What do you do as the attorney?
Hundreds, lots of those phone calls. That's what we do. People call all the time. I have CPS at my door. It's like, that's what we're here for. So, it depends on the case as far as what we do. There's not a exact playbook. It just, what we'll do is we'll tell our members, if CPS does come to your door, just say, excuse me one moment while I get my attorney on the phone, step back inside, and then call us 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll call, get connected with one of our attorneys. And then we'll you'll say, CPS is at my door. And we'll ask, okay, well, do you know why they're there, or what's going on? And then from there, we'll figure out, do we just go ahead and, all right, put it on speakerphone and let me talk to them? Or, if it's more low key, maybe just say, hey, my attorney says for me to just get your business card and he'll reach out to you, something like that. So it just kind of depends on what the case is.
Yeah.
But then we're involved, again, not just there at the door, but all the way to the resolution of the case. If we need to go to court, if we need to hire, I'm in Texas, but we have attorneys all around the country that we work with. So if you're not in Texas, our organizations all across the U.S. So we'll then hire an attorney in your area. We cover that. And that's, part of your membership. Then that attorney's there with you every step of the way.
Have you tried CTC Math yet with your child? Here's a testimonial from another happy homeschool mom. Amber said, I'm absolutely thrilled with CTC Math. It's a rare find that I've used with my children for more than 5 years now. I have 6 children using CTC Math, and each child has found it easy to navigate and very applicable. Thank you so much for all that you are doing in providing quality math lessons for my children. If you're looking for a great online math program, visit ctcmath.com. That's ctcmath.com. We are back with Bradley. Let's talk about laws, because you mentioned that a little bit, I'm not an attorney, so I have no idea really what the laws are. If somebody came to my door, I would answer it because I wouldn't want it to look like I was hiding anything. But at the same time, I don't really know what my rights are. And I know that these are different state to state. Some states, again, are really super free in this regard. Some are not. So how do we know what our laws are and what our rights are as parents from state to state? And is there a kind of a general, here's what's legal everywhere, here's what's illegal everywhere, and then some of the details are different depending on the state?
Yeah, well, obviously it depends on the issue. Let me give you the shortcut, and then we can kind of talk about some of these as we go here.
Okay.
The shortcut for everybody, and you don't even have to be a member of Heritage Defense for this, but you can just go to our website. We have something called our Law and Policy Vault, where we have done the legal research for all 50 states on dozens of issues facing parental rights, or that relate to parental rights, relate to parents. Like vaccine laws or newborn laws, when you go to the hospital and you have a newborn, all kind of laws there about different kind of things that, vaccinations and eye ointments and all kind of things that go along, tests and genetic testing and this and that go along there, or laws about car seats, or can I leave my child home alone, or when I can't leave them in the car while I run in the store, and all kind of other issues. When can my child make medical decisions on their own, even though they're a minor, and a lot more. I'm just listing, kind of hitting highlights here. But people can go find that on our website. You don't even have to be a member of Heritage Defense. It's totally free. You just go, give us your email address and create a login, and then you'll get access to all of that. Totally free. So that's our Law and Policy Vault at our website, heritagedefense.org. And so, we can kind of talk about the highlights and kind of what things look like generally around the country on some of those.
Yeah.
But if people really want the details for their state, for each state, we have the grade that your state gets. So does your state get an A or an F or a D, or kind of compared to other states? And then what's the summary of the law in that state? We even have citations for that law. If you want to actually go look at that law for yourself, then you can go grab that and go enjoy legal research with people like me enjoy. But but yeah, you can do all that for yourself.
Okay, so let's talk about kind of an overview of what it looks like across the nation.
Yeah, so there's lots of different laws that impact parental rights. I normally kind of run through 8 that most people kind of think about or should be thinking about. One of them is laws about vaccines. I think every parent should make an educated decision about whether they're going to vaccinate, if they are, what vaccine schedule, what vaccines, all of that. Really, think that through. Yeah. And our position as an organization, we're not, pro or anti. What we are is pro parental rights. That's your decision to make for your children. It's not the government's decision to make, what vaccines your child gets. So we're here for you and your parental rights, whatever decision you make on that front. And so you can go to that website, Law and Policy Vault, on our website, and see what's the vaccine laws in your state, because every state has some kind of vaccine mandate. and then some kind of exemption to that mandate. What a lot of people don't realize, though, is that in lots of states, the mandate doesn't even apply to homeschoolers in the first place. So you don't even have to worry about, well, do I need to claim a religious exemption or medical exemption or philosophical exemption, because it doesn't even apply to you.
Right.
But there are a lot of states where it does apply to homeschoolers. So you just need to go see, kind of what's the law in my state. Does it apply to homeschoolers? And then if it does, all right, what exemptions are available? So that's a big one that, that every parent should, look into that issue.
Yeah. Can I pause you there really quickly? When it comes to vaccinations for kids, people often say, just do the research, which absolutely, I mean, our family really believes in do your research when it comes to vaccinating your kids. Do you have a place on your website that shows some of the research regarding vaccines, or do you have a place that people can go for that we can link to?
Not as far as the actual vaccine, all the kind of medical information. That's not really, we're not doctors or that kind of researchers. And I mean, I'm a parent, so I do my own research, but as far as being able to advise other parents on that, I'm not really, that's not really what we do.
Sure.
And so, I encourage parents to kind of do their own research on that. But as far as finding out what the laws are, that's what you can definitely do on our website. Okay.
If we can find some good research on that, we'll pop that into the show notes so that you guys can make an educated decision for your kids. But okay, so we're looking at vaccines, and we can look at what our laws are for that. And we'll put a link to your website. It's heritagedefense.com. Is that the website?
heritagedefense.org.
.org. Okay.
That's right.
.org. And then we'll put a link to that so people can find that. What other things should we know?
I mean, another one that comes up is the subject of mandatory reporters. So a lot of people are, again, somewhat familiar with this, that there are mandatory reporters in every state, that they have to report any suspicion of child abuse, neglect to, Child Protective Services.
Yeah.
And, but that differs by state. There are actually, I believe 19 states where everyone is a mandatory reporter, not just doctors and, teachers and the people you would expect, but every single person in the state is a mandatory reporter. But then there's, in other states, it's kind of who you would expect: doctors, nurses, teachers, law enforcement, psychologists, therapists, that kind of folk, who are mandatory reporters. And, at first, when you first hear that, you're like, oh, well, of course, everyone should be reporting child abuse. What's the problem with that? The problem is that when you make it a legal mandate, you end up getting major over-reporting. If someone can lose their license to practice, if it's a crime, if you don't report, if you can be fired, if you can be legally liable for the injuries to that child, even if you had nothing to do with causing them, simply for not reporting. What that's going to result in, and what it does result in, is major over-reporting. Just like I talked about earlier, over 90% of reports to CPS themselves ultimately deems as unfounded.
Right.
That means even CPS thinks, oh yeah, there's no actual abuse or neglect going on here. Right. So that just gives you an indication that there's major over-reporting, because we've effectively put a legal gun to people's heads, said you must report. And so that's what happens, is you end up like in the medical, the top two sources of reports is the school personnel and law enforcement. Most homeschoolers are not having too many interactions with those. So number one for homeschoolers is the medical community, doctors, hospitals, nurses. And then even beyond that, kind of the mental health, psychologists, therapists. That's the number one source of reports. I would say the number one source is unfounded reports. And so a lot of people need to know kind of what that is. And you can also see that on our website, who's mandatory reporter and who's not, because it's a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that would be a huge problem. And partly people might think that, again, going back to, you might have a neighbor who thinks that it's terrible and illegal even for you to homeschool your kids. And so they're going to call CPS on you and say, hey, these people are, terrible parents. They're not putting their kids in school. All the while, their kids are learning everything they need to learn, plus more, being discipled by their parents at home. But that neighbor or family member might not agree with that. And so if they're a mandatory reporter, then that would be the person who would jump on board there and say, oh yeah, I've got something to report.
They would even feel legally required to report.
Right.
Yeah. So they kind of really to illustrate this for folks, like the problem with this, because obviously everyone should report, children being harmed.
Sure.
Actually, that's definitely call law enforcement. That's their jurisdiction.
Absolutely.
They should get involved and stop that. But what ends up happening is, like in a hospital context, a lot of hospitals end up putting in place, they have lawyers that are there to protect the hospital, and the lawyers tell them, hey, let's put in policies that we're going to end up erring on the side of over-reporting, but it's going to protect you legally. Mm-hmm. So we've seen hospital policies that say if a child has more than one recent injury, it's an automatic report, even if there's zero suspicion of abuse or neglect. If a child has a certain kind of, if they break a bone, it's a certain kind of break, spiral fracture or oblique fracture, automatic report to CPS. Wow. Or if a child under 2 has a suspected head injury, then it's an automatic report to CPS. And this is what I'm describing is a policy at most hospitals.
Wow. Yeah.
And even urgent cares as well. So for example, we had one case where a mom's at the park with her children, carrying around, I believe, 5-month-old baby, and she slipped on some gravel and fell, and she cradled him to try to protect him as she fell. And she thinks that she did, but she wasn't sure, so she decided to go to the ER, get him checked out, make sure he was okay. Went there, they checked him out, said, yeah, no head injury, he's fine, you did right, you protected him, good job. By the way, we are reporting you to CPS.
Wow.
And the mom's like, why? Do you think I, abused or neglected my child? They're like, no. We think you're a great mom. I mean, you brought your child in here. You're wonderful. Good job. But we have a policy that if a child under 2 has a suspected head injury, then we report it. And the mom's like, well, but there's not a head injury.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but there was a suspected
that there
head
could
injury.
be.
So they're suspecting that we've ruled it out, but we suspected that there was, so we had to report under our policy. So that's the sort of things that you see, and that leads to major overreporting and leads to people having to deal with CPS. Whenever CPS should be focusing on cases that are much more serious.
Yeah. It's so scary, going even to the doctor. I mean, we've had several instances. We had one with my youngest daughter when she was 3. I took her in just for her regular baby visit check. And I remember this was at Kaiser in California, and they handed me a list it was a questionnaire. And, usually they'll ask questions, are they getting enough playtime outside? Are they eating enough fruits and vegetables? Are they getting enough sleep? All those questions. And so, I'm checking off the list. And then it came down to some questions that I was like, whoa, wait, hold the brakes here. Because one of the questions was, do you ever yell at you? It said, do you or anyone in your household ever yell at your children? Well, by nature, I'm not a yeller. I typically don't ever yell at my kids. I just, that's not, my personality. But there had been times where, literally one where my daughter almost got hit by a car because she jetted out in the street on her bike. And so I yelled at her, I screamed at the top of my lungs. And there have been other times where I've had to yell at them for things that could harm them, but not in a way that was abusive at all. It was I'm going to save your life right now. So I have to yell so that you can hear me. And as I was reading through that list and some other questions that were on there, I was like, they are either going to make me a liar or they're going to make me a criminal. There's no other in between. There was no place for explanation. Okay, well, if you yell at your kids, why?
Right.
Well, because she almost got hit by a car, and because she almost drank the bottle of Windex because it looked like Kool-Aid. There are things that are really important reasons to yell at your children in the time. And so anyway, but I just remember I folded up the piece of paper because I thought, I'm not giving this to them because I don't want to be a liar or a criminal. So I'm just not even going to answer these questions. And we went back for our visit with the doctor. The nurse took us back and she said, oh, do you have the questionnaire? And I said, oh, yeah, they gave it to me. I said, it's in my purse. And she said, can I have it? And I said, oh, no, thank you. I'm opting out of that today. And the look on her face, she said, well, I have to make a note of that in your file. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. But I think oftentimes parents don't even know that they can opt out of things or that they should opt out of things. They're just asked questions and they just answer the questions that are asked to them. And again, oftentimes it makes you a criminal without any
Right.
criminal activity. And that's a really scary place for a parent to be. Join Apologia for the Homeschool Boot Camp, a free video series that provides practical guidance and wisdom from experienced homeschool parents. You'll discover how to equip your family for academic, social, and spiritual success. Plus, you'll discover how to build deeper and stronger family relationships. Homeschool Boot Camp covers how to break free from the public school mindset, daily planning, supporting students with learning challenges, homeschooling as a working parent, navigating the high school years, and much more. Find this incredible free homeschool resource at apologia.com/bootcamp. So I'd love to talk about, as you have spent many, many years dealing with CPS cases and different families, CPS workers, what are some of the things that you've learned? Just maybe you can give us a few tips from the cases that you've dealt with on how we can navigate through this as parents.
Yeah, well, there's I kind of have two sets of tips. One is like how not to have a CPS case in the first place. Not that there's any guarantees. You can be a perfect parent if such a thing exists and still have CPS cases. I mean, that's why we exist, because we don't represent actual child abuse, right? We represent innocent parents who've been falsely accused or overblown accusations, and we're plenty busy with that. But there's definitely things that parents can do to lower the likelihood that they're going to have a case. So that's kind of one set of tips I give people. And then another set is, all right, if you do have a case, what are some things that how to handle that? And of course, that's what we're here for. Heritage Defense is to be attorneys for people and walk them through that and help them with that. So on the first set, one thing that again, there's a lot of very specific tips I can give, but so some things are, but the medical community is a frequent source of, disagreements, between parents and medical community. And you can go to one hospital and get one answer, and go to another and get a different answer. And it's hard to know always. Most of the time, it's pretty clear how your child should be, the medical treatment they should get. But it's not always, right. It's not always perfectly cut and dry. You have to make decisions, and sometimes you have disagreements with doctors or hospitals, and how do you navigate those? So that's something that we have families that call us regularly, like, hey, I'm at the hospital, I'm having a potential disagreement here about treatment. How should I navigate this? So even if it's not a CPS case, we can still help people navigate through that who are members of Heritage Defense. The one thing, though, that we do tell people is that does come up is people leaving the hospital AMA. That means against medical advice. So if you leave a hospital without being formally discharged, then they're like, no, we don't think you should leave. I mean, we can't
tie you
imprison
down
you or tie you down. Although in some cases they can perform what's called medical detention of minors, and there's actually laws in some states that allow them to basically arrest children. That we have that in our law and policy vault. People can go see what the law is on your state on that. But aside from that, they say, hey, we're just not approving of you leaving, so you leave AMA. And so that's something that if you do that, if you leave a hospital AMA, the odds are very good that you will have a CPS worker that comes to your home, within the next 24 hours. If not, they're waiting at your house when you get there. And so we do recommend folks be careful about leaving a hospital AMA, and don't do it unless there's actually something harmful that the hospital's insisting on doing to your child right then, that you need to remove them and go to another hospital to avoid that. Obviously, protect your child. That comes first. But if you do have to leave a hospital AMA against medical advice, our recommendation is go straight to another hospital, right? Because if you go home and then go to another hospital the next day or a few hours later, but in the meantime CPS shows up, then it kind of undermines your claim that you were going to go somewhere else. So it's best to go straight to another hospital, go get that second opinion right away, instead of going home. So that's one tip, because we see a number of cases that do arise from that. So that's definitely something that people can do to hopefully help avoid those. Another thing, again, some of this is just medical because that's the number one source of reports for people that aren't having frequent interactions with school personnel or the police, is have a good relationship. Have a good relationship with a pediatrician. I think sometimes people can get just feel like, wow, when I go to the pediatrician, I just feel like they don't like me. I opt out of vaccines, and so I'm just not going to take my child to the pediatrician ever. I'm just not going to have a pediatrician for my child. We're just going to do urgent care or go to the hospital if we have issues. And I certainly understand where that's coming from. Our recommendation is that folks do have a good relationship with a pediatrician, even if it means you have to drive an hour or two to find somebody who's respectful of your parental rights. You don't have to find somebody who agrees with you 100%, but they do need to agree that you are the parent, you are the primary decision maker for your child, and they defer to you. They're there to provide advice, and as long as you're not recklessly endangering your child or purposely harming them, then hey, it's your call to decide what treatment your child gets and what they need. So find somebody like that who's respectful of parental rights and have a relationship with them, because that can go a long ways. If you ever do have a situation with the hospital and have a disagreement, having a pediatrician that you have a history with can be very helpful to help you advocate for you in that situation. Or if you ever have a CPS case, having that pediatrician there that can say, write a quick letter on their letterhead that just says, I've been treating this child since, for years, and I've never had any concern of abuse or neglect. That can go a long way to getting cases shut down. So there's I could go on and on with lots of other tips, but that just gives you a few. But wherever you want to go, we can talk more if you want.
I do have a question. This might sound like kind of an odd question, and this is more in regards to heritage defense, because you said a few minutes ago that your job is to represent the good parents, the parents who are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not abusive to their kids at all. But, the world that we live in, there are families who are truly abusive to their kids in one way or another. How do you discern, as an attorney who's representing the families that are part of heritage defense, how do you discern the families who are doing the right things versus those who maybe there is some abuse going on there? And if so, I guess first, how do you discern that? Yeah. Second, if you see that there actually is some sort of abuse going on, what do you do with that?
Yeah. I mean, we just use our best judgment. Basically, we've handled lots of these cases over the years. And so, we can typically tell. And sometimes it's, a lot of times, in fact, the way that it comes in is there's actually one parent that calls and says, hey, my child just said something, that my spouse, has committed some kind of act of abuse. And we're like, well, is it credible? Do you think that that's actually happened? And, the spouse says, well, yes, I think it did. I think it is true. At that point, when we have kind of a conflict of interest, right? Because both parents are members of Heritage Defense. So in that instance, we have to say, well, you definitely need to, report this and get an attorney, but unfortunately, we're not going to be able to help you with it. So, definitely stuff comes up, and that's kind of how we have to handle it. That we don't exist to defend child abusers, and so and unfortunately, even if there's an innocent spouse in the home and the children are innocent, that's something that they have to get another attorney to help with that sort of thing.
Yeah, that would be hard. So hard to discern that, and then to know how to help that family, because they do exist. And that'd be a really hard thing to navigate. Let's talk really quickly about medical consent for preteens and teens. I know this is a really big issue today. We had this happen several years ago. My oldest I think she was about 14. And I don't even remember why we went to the doctor. It wasn't for a regular checkup. But for some reason we had gone to the doctor. And the doctor started asking my daughter all of these very personal questions. I mean, she was asking her if she was physically active with boys. I mean, she was literally I think she was 14. And she's asking her these questions in front of me. But before she started asking these questions, she said, do you want your mom to step out of the room while I ask you some questions? And Brooklyn just looked at me. She was like, no, my mom can stay. I want my mom to be in here. And then she proceeded to ask her these very, very personal questions. And it was so uncomfortable. And I was like, okay, I think we're good here. But I was so in shock because I did not expect that. One, didn't expect her to ask me to leave. And two, I did not expect that she was going to ask my 14-year-old these very personal questions. Talk through this whole mess of medical consent and them asking our preteens and teens for parents to leave. Like, what do we do with that? I mean, it's just such a hard situation to be in.
Yeah, I mean, what you just described is what I often tell people, who are the children are kind of just getting to that preteen, 11, 12, 13, time frame. Tell them to expect exactly what you encountered. And that is, they'll try to ask you, all right, Mom, would you step out of the room while I talk to your child, or Dad, step out of the room. And, and typically what they're wanting to ask about is questions related to sexual activity and related to mental health and, things and drug use. Those are kind of the most, substance abuse. Those are the things that they're normally asking about. And it's not because they necessarily have any suspicion of those things.
Right.
It's just, they just ask all children those questions because it's pervasive enough that children, do have issues with those around that age, that they go ahead and start talking to them about it. And, obviously you're just like, wait a second, I brought my child in for a sports physical or something.
Right.
Why do we need to get into all this? I can talk with my child about those things. Thank you very much. So generally it's something that, there are actually laws. One reason why they start asking about these sorts of things is that there are laws in every state that actually allow children at a certain age to get medical treatment, even without parental consent or parental notice on some of those issues, kind of depending on the state and perhaps even other issues. Again, that's on our law policy for free on our website. People can visit and see kind of what's the law in your state, on when children can actually get treatment without parental consent on those things. But those, it's a very common thing that they ask. And what we recommend is when your child is, getting near that age and you need to go to the doctor for whatever reason, go ahead and talk to them before you go and just say, hey, listen, they're probably going to ask for me to step out of the room. I'm your parent. I'm paying for this. I need to be in the room. I know your whole history better than you do. And so I need to be in the room. And, are you good with that? And hopefully your child says yes. If your child says no, then that's a whole other conversation.
Right.
But if your child says, yeah, of course, then generally what we say is, it's best if the child, speaks up and says, like, no, I want my mom in the room, or no, I want my dad in the room. It just comes across a little bit better coming from the child.
Sure.
Than from the adult.
Can an adult step in and say, no, I don't want to leave. I want to stay in the room?
Absolutely. I mean, it's your child. So you can absolutely say that. Yeah, absolutely. You can certainly, just kind of say like, nope, not leaving.
Yeah.
And I think that's what parents should do. I mean, this is your child. They're not an adult yet. They still need guidance. That's what you're there for. And, so yeah, I think you should still be in the room.
Yeah. What a weird thing to be asked as a parent, but again, I mean, you look at our society, public schools are trying to take control of parenting our children for us. And so why would doctors not try to take control of that same thing? It doesn't even make sense. I mean, God put us in charge of our kids. And like you said, we know them better than they know themselves in most cases. And so we need to be the ones there to advocate for them, to answer questions for them, to protect them. And man, it's such a strange time that we're living in. So do you have anything else on that? I mean, I think that's amazing. Yes, we need to just be aware that that's happening and be willing to step in.
Sometimes they even make it where you can't even access your child's medical records, after a certain age, and that's something that your child can actually sign something that gives you access to that. And so we encourage families to do that. We even have a form in our members only section of our website for folks to download that form and get that in the file to make sure that they still have access, even once the child crosses a certain threshold. And again, it kind of depends on the state on that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's shocking. Once your kid turns 18, everything changes. I mean, we learned this. Our oldest is 19 now. And I cannot believe how quickly things changed. It was like, as soon as we would go to a doctor's appointment or anything, the bank called and they were like, okay, we got to switch her account over. She's now an adult. And it was just like everything flipped upside down. And it was so weird that all of a sudden, like I had no control over anything because she's now a legal adult, but she's still a kid. She still lives in my home. It was just really weird. And so, thankfully we have a great relationship and she didn't care to have me apart from her in every way, but it's crazy that once that 18 mark hits, all of a sudden the parent in the eyes of the world is no longer necessary. And
right.
It's a scary place to be. So Bradley, tell our listeners again where they can find out more about you and Heritage Defense. Yeah,
they can visit our website, heritagedefense.org. Again, we'd love for everybody to go there, check out the Law and Policy Vault, get some information. And if you want to follow me, I'm on X, Bradley W. Pierce.
Okay. What is the cost of becoming a member of Heritage Defense?
It's $19 a month, or if people will do want to do the whole year at one time, it's $190 for the year, at least currently. Okay, and that's per family. Correct.
I'm assuming that covers the entire family.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what size the family is. The same price.
Okay, so if you have 2 kids like me or 12 kids like Bradley, it doesn't matter. It's the same cost. Right. So, we'll put those links in the show notes. Thank you guys so much for listening and for being with us today. Again, we will be in Branson, Missouri, May 15th through 17th. We would love to see you there. And if you have not visited our website, we have a new website, you guys. Garrett worked really hard on this. It's been months of blood, sweat, and tears as he has worked to update our website. You can still watch the movie for free through the website, and we've got all sorts of other great stuff on there. Go see us there at schoolhouserocked.com. I've told you before, you are our marketing team. So if you would do us a favor and share this episode with your friends, we would be so grateful for that. Make sure that you're subscribed to this on whatever podcast platform you're listening to it on, or on YouTube. I know lots of you watch the videos. You know what's funny? I never ever watch these videos. Like never ever. Sometimes I see them pop up, but I don't usually ever watch the videos. I listened, but I don't watch. I don't think anybody really enjoys watching themselves on film. So anyway, but if you're one of those who enjoys watching these on YouTube, make sure you like these videos, comment on them. We love seeing your comments, and send them to your friends. Let them know why they should listen to the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. Have a great rest of your week. Stay tuned to the very end to hear what's coming up next week, and we will see you back here then. Bye.
You're listening to the Biblical Family Network.
Hey, I'm Miki.
And I'm Will.
And we're the co-hosts of the Culture Proof podcast. We want to invite you to join us every week as we discuss what's happening in the world and then filter those happenings through a decidedly biblical lens.
There are many questions, especially when we see what's happening in our culture today, but the answers are found within the Word of God. So that's where we want to look.
Amen. When we resist those cultural trends that rival the truth,
we remain culture proof.
Anything that's worthwhile is hard work. But our culture for the last several generations has pretty much said value and meaning only comes if money comes with it. If there's a paycheck or if there's a grade or some kind of external pat on the back, mostly tied to paychecks and income. And so to come home and not have that, and to not have any kind of external grade or gold star or pat on the back is really disorienting. I just came to realize that all the work in tending a house is life-giving work. And it all matters because life matters, and it's all fostering life. If there was no life in the home, then none of that work would exist. But that isn't better. So the work is good work, because we're tending and keeping and promoting and growing life in all these different ways.